Surviving Reality contains explicit content full of snark and sarcasm that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Surviving Reality.
I'm Corey.
And I'm Carly, and today we're talking about Titan, the OceanGate Submersible disaster.
This is the Netflix documentary that just came out this past week, not to be confused with the Discovery doc that was on soon-to-be HBO Max.
Was HBO Max, currently is Max, will be HBO Max again.
Yet again. Return of the King, in a lot of ways.
So I guess that's good news. If you can't get enough of Titanic, if you can't get enough of billionaires imploding, there is more for you to watch about this.
And this is an extra special episode. If you're listening on the public feed release day, you are listening on the 2-year anniversary of the Titan implosion that took place. What a special day, marks the occasion. Didn't really plan to do that, but that's how it worked out.
OceanGate's Titan tourist submersible imploded in 2023 on a deep sea dive to the Titanic. This documentary details how a bold vision ended in tragedy.
I don't think bold vision so much as
Hubris and blatant negligence?
Delusion. I think that was the word that I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a bold vision. It's full-on delusion.
I'm comfortable with those three descriptors. So we set out here at the beginning of the documentary. For those of you who are not familiar with what happened 2 years ago, the Titan goes down to the Titanic and goes MIA.
Titan, which is a underwater manned submersible craft that can carry a couple of passengers.
No. I'm sorry. Not passengers. We can't legally use that term.
Well, these ones, I think they were paying customers to be on board for this experience. But yes, mission specialists, of course. Legally, that's what we're going to be called, especially the 19-year-old son who I'm sure he had plenty of nautical experience to be a mission specialist as well.
No credentials required, very
Not
clearly.
Really. Yeah. So this ended up being, this is part of OceanGate is the company. Titan is their submersible craft. The CEO is L. Ron Hubbard. What's his name? What's
Stockton Rush.
Stockton Rush. He's the CEO / pilot for this excursion.
And they're not really sure what happened. It takes a few hours for them to even report
at the time
that something has happened.
Yeah. We heard a loud pop, but right before we lost communication with the submersible, but that could have been anything.
And they send out search and rescue teams, like a lot of search and rescue teams, because everyone's confused because this craft also isn't registered with any particular country or location.
It's not flagged.
So they're not really sure who's responsible. We've got Canadian search teams. We've got American search teams.
Well, because it's an American company, OceanGate is an American company, the boat that towed them out into the ocean to launch near the Titanic crash site was a Canadian vessel that took them out there, and then they are in international waters. So it gets very complicated. Yeah, there's a lot of whose jurisdiction are we under, who's responsible for the investigation, who's looking into this, who's trying to find them.
Can we agree that the reason they put so much effort into locating this craft, even though it seemed very obvious that it had likely ended up at the bottom of the ocean,
suffered a catastrophic failure of some kind,
is because there were people on board who were extremely wealthy?
That, and also I think a lot of it had to do with the OceanGate crew that was at the surface not wanting things to come to light, which became very evident as part of the documentary series of seeing what the business culture was like at OceanGate too. I think it was very minimizing what was going on. We don't want to speak of any flaws or issues. We don't want to slow down any sorts of runway towards profit here, because we need to have more paying customers, mission specialists on board for the next excursion here.
Yeah, you're probably right. They're like, we have no idea what could have happened because this was a flawless craft.
Unsinkable by most standards. Most people's standards.
It becomes a worldwide sensation. There are countdowns on the news of how much oxygen is supposedly left inside the submersible.
Did we not have this conversation when I saw that they kept putting up the counter with the oxygen countdown on all the different news media outlets? And I thought to myself, this is really unnecessary because I think they know where this thing is. It's not just out there floating aimlessly, lost at sea, Castaway style, Tom Hanks, Wilson. That's not what we're dealing with.
Well, the unfortunate thing is there are 5 people on board. We already talked about Stockton. Then there's also Hamish Harding, who is a billionaire. There's Paul Henry Nagelet. I probably am going to butcher some of the names.
It's Paul Henry, because he's French.
It doesn't matter. He's Mr. Titanic. That's his nickname.
Mr. Titanic.
We've also got...
And PH. They call him PH.
The Dawoods, father and son, who is 19 years old. And there is the very sad story that he did not want to go on this mission the day of. He was trying to get out of it.
He was doing the teenage son thing. He does not have an interest in this, but his father was very interested in this and essentially forced him to go along.
Very sad. I guess he wasn't neurodivergent because I would have been locked inside that thing ready to see the Titanic.
Oh, you would have been first on.
Oh,
yeah, this is a big problem.
I want to get the porthole view.
Yeah, wait till it opens up, and then you're really going to get the full experience here.
We've already talked about this. I would totally be convinced to do something like this.
If we were in that tax bracket and money was not an issue, a barrier here for the expense, because I think, what was it, about $100,000 per ticket, what they were charging?
$250,000. That means
$250,000?
every time they went down, they made $1 million.
See, I think you're missing the humble origins of OceanGate, the company, though, Carly, because they started out as an educational endeavor. That was their humble beginnings, the rooted in knowledge enhancement for underwater biology and exploration, yes.
I do like the backstory that Stockton's wife, I forget her name, is related to the Strausses. You're staring at me like you don't know the Titanic lore of the Strausses.
The Levi Strausses? They got some trusty moving denims on this thing?
The heirs to the Macy's department store fortune, who ended up at the bottom of the ocean. They are depicted in the movie Titanic. They go lay in bed together and hold each other's hands as the cabin starts to flood. So there's a personal connection to the Titanic itself.
Which kind of explains when they were going into Stockton's backstory too. He has lineage that traces back to 2 different family members who signed the Declaration of Independence, and
I thought that was actually a cool origin story of his name. Stockton Rush was both of their last names.
Yeah, and I guess it explains it a little bit more, but like it's one of those generational wealth people marrying into other generational wealth, and now they have to figure out something that they want to do
with all of the money.
With all of this
because
money.
They're just so insanely rich that they have to start some type of business.
So they're going to start a business that then is going to monopolize underwater exploration. But it started off as an educational thing. That's how they get people involved.
They never said that.
That's the goal. I mean,
Yes.
That's what it ends up being. Because what they find out is through this underwater exploration, because Stockton wanted to go to space. He was interested in astrophysicism.
He wanted to be an astronaut, I believe
okay.
is what they said. But
didn't he go for like...
space is already claimed by another billionaire.
Yeah, SpaceX was already up and running, so Stockton didn't want to go that route. So he decided, well, let me go underwater then. James Cameron's kind of backed off from that, so I might be able to move in here. And so he saw a business opportunity is what this ended up being.
Yes, a direct quote from him. Accessibility is ownership, which is actually really disgusting.
Not a great way to think about it, because I think what the example that they gave was if there's an island in the middle of the ocean and you're the only person who can get to that island, you are able to access that, therefore you own it. That's not really how that works. I think from a legal standpoint, I don't think that would hold up.
But I do think that quote does explain that he was intending to monopolize ocean exploration.
The mentality, the thought process of this man was on full display.
So not only are we going to go to the ocean, we need something that is going to be newsworthy, that you're going to get a lot of PR around, that people are interested in. The Titanic, duh.
Obviously. Everybody knows about the Titanic.
And only like a few people have been down to the Titanic.
Because it's really hard to get to where the Titanic is. It's very deep in the ocean. There's not a lot of manned crafts that are able to get down that far underwater.
It's 4,000 meters deep, which when you get that deep in the ocean, there's a lot of pressure. And that's an important part of this story. So we're setting our eyes on tourism to the Titanic. That is going to be our guiding light in this mission to creating some type of vehicle that's going to be able to get us there.
So they start working with Boeing to come up with this design or work through. They're trying to figure out, how do we make the cheapest fucking thing possible? First of all,
that's not what they told people.
Oh, well, no, not up front. That's not what we're going to say. But we're doing this in the most capitalistic way, where we need to remove all of the costs, increase all of the profits, and don't give a shit about any human life in between from point A to point B. Does that make sense?
Yes, but we're going to say that this is innovation. That's what we're doing here. We're being innovative. We're making something that is less expensive, but also a much lighter material in weight, which is going to allow them to create more vessels more easily.
A fleet.
And they're going to be easier to transport.
There are some flaws in the design because the submersible itself, I'll go ahead, that's my gentle way of saying that, and a legal disclaimer of how I can bypass. There's some flaws in the design. That becomes evident, very clear later on in the film as well. But I would say the initial drawbacks on the design is that it's a submersible craft. It needs to be towed out to the launch site, and then the access into the vehicle is very terrifying because they're just going in through, like, the porthole is the entire front of the craft, and then you are bolted in from the outside, where you are now locked in this carbon fiber canister with a titanium cap and a big ass window.
And a PlayStation controller.
Not even, well, I think for some of the demos.
I don't think that PlayStation wants to be associated with this.
Yeah, Sony's like, hey, keep our names out of your mouth here. Because I think he did hold up, it was a PlayStation controller on the one of the...
It was one of the earlier iterations because there
ones.
were two other crafts that they built first.
Because then there were some other tours where he held up the controller as well, and that looked like a knockoff Logitech that had really bad reviews on Amazon at the time.
So that's even cheaper than the PlayStation controller would have been.
It is a third-party USB controller interface with terrible reviews, yes.
So they found another place to cut cost.
They saved
one singular controller that they need.
The one device that controls all of the movement and functionality of the vessel. Yes, they saved a solid $40 on that controller right there.
I didn't know that you were going to go into the whole thing about being bolted into this. I thought we were going to start at the fact that they're using carbon fiber.
Well, I mean, that's a big problem. I would say, so the issue that I have with this is that when they are going with carbon fiber, there's a reason why people don't use carbon fiber for the depths that you're going to, because there's different classes of submersibles. So when you're getting classed, it rates the safe and effective ranges of where you can use this based on the materials that make the vessel. So they were showing a couple different ones where it's just an entire clear dome. Obviously, you can't take that very far underwater. It's a cool experience, but if you start facing depth pressures that we're talking about at the Titanic level, it's going to implode. So there's different levels and ratings based on the materials and based on how far you can go underwater. Carbon fiber is not cut out for that.
Well, we're starting off kind of with a hypothesis, which is we believe we could build a vessel that could go to that depth out of carbon fiber. It's never been done before, but we're innovators in the industry, and this is what we're setting out to do. And Boeing says, we're pretty sure that's not going to work.
I'd be willing to bet if you're trying to take this thing to 4,000 meters underwater, it's going to pop. But we'll test it. Yeah, we'll work with you on it because, hey, if we figure out a way to do it, we want to have our name on that patent too.
Right, that's exactly it. Forget the sky. We're going to the sea as well.
Yeah, we'll check it out. And then we have the devices that you'd be able to test these pressurized scenarios with these different materials. So then that way you can get a good range and understand the mechanical components that are going into this build.
We'll figure out how you can land this thing upside down. We'll do all kinds of crazy shit.
We're just getting started. Yeah, we're barely scratching the surface here. So the testing originally doesn't really go well. I mean, it's about as what you'd expect. The carbon fiber reaches a point where under certain pressures, catastrophic failures happen and the thing just shreds apart. Not what you want to have happen at 4,000 feet below sea level.
No, and they're not
4,000 meters. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not going too far with feet.
Couple more.
At some point, Boeing just decides we've gotten the answer. This is how the scientific method works. We had a hypothesis. We tested it repeatedly. And unfortunately, the same result occurred, which was that this doesn't fucking work.
You'll die. It will kill you. Turns out, like most things, when it goes in the ocean like that, it's going to get crushed like a soda can.
And Stockton's like, I don't care. You guys do the sky stuff. I do the water stuff. Thank you for the blueprints. I will be taking these with me.
These are mine now, my plans, and I'm going to move forward with building this craft that you all say cannot be done, which I don't think anybody said you can't build a craft. I think what people were saying was, if you build this craft, at some point it is a mathematical certainty that you will get crushed like a Coca-Cola can 4,000 meters below the ocean.
This is where I have a big problem with Stockton, because he's trying to call himself an innovator and a scientist, and yet you are not listening to the results of your experiment. At some point in the documentary, they talk about how it's too hard to go back to square one. That is the point. That is how this works.
That's why it is hard.
Sometimes when you're doing science, you find out that what you thought isn't correct, and then you have to start over. But he doesn't want to do that because he spent a lot of money. A lot of time was invested.
He has a whole company now that's built around this, and he has people who are working for him.
Talented people. He's able to attract really talented people at the very beginning of the company.
He speaks very confidently. He says things like he knows what he's talking about. He kind of talks like Ben Shapiro at like half speed or maybe like quarter speed. But there is kind of like a talking down in the tone that happens too, where it makes you feel dumb for questioning anything that he's going to say.
No, he immediately reminded me of Elizabeth Holmes.
It was a very much, I thought that they would just plaster do or do not, there is no try on the inside of this thing. That would have fit the same model.
You know, where she just constantly was talking about what the end result was going to be and all of the rest of it was bullshit, but she just said it very confidently so no one questioned it.
Well, that and like, yeah, don't worry about the science in between, because if Stockton Rush was going to be a creator, an innovator, a scientist, what he would need to do is then looking at carbon fiber and the physical components and the structure of that material, finding out, hey, it fails between this range and this range, and we need to be in that range. Do you come up with a material that is more resilient than carbon fiber, but has all those same other qualities of it being lightweight and malleable and all these different elements that you need that item to do? That would be innovative. That would be creative if you are coming up with these things that solve those problems. But instead, he's just ignoring the problems and then continuing to forge ahead against everyone else's advice.
Now, we're probably just going to rely on the very sophisticated acoustic monitoring system that we've installed for safety, which just boils down to an audio system that records all of the sounds of the carbon fiber cracking and splitting.
Okay, yeah, so here's the thing. With carbon fiber, it's long strands of plastic, basically.
That's like glued together from my understanding.
Yeah, they kind of melt it and fuse it. And so it's great because it's lightweight, it's malleable, you can form fit it. a lot of different functions that are usable. It's not great for withstanding copious amounts of pressure at the depths that they're going to, because what happens is those strands start to break. And when they break, then the structural integrity of the entire vessel then begins to fail.
Let's describe how the acoustic monitoring system works then.
It's a microphone that records the pops when they happen. So it's not a great system because the failures are already happening. And when you're at that depth, any singular failure that takes place could be a catastrophic failure because you don't know how bad it's going to fracture.
Right. You're inside, bolted into the submersible, and the people above the surface are watching the recordings of this happening in real time. And what they've done is created a fancy chart that, again, tracks in real time as the depth increases of the vessel, the pops, and then how loud the pops are, which I'm not sure is actually relevant. Does a larger pop equate more danger, or does lots of frequent little pops? They don't know the answer to that.
I mean, yeah, it's not a pure science, and they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to say that this is the system that they have implemented as a safety feature.
They also don't have a threshold where they say this many pops
too much
means we have to go back up to the surface because something bad is going to happen.
No, they're just kind of going with it. I think what gets me the most is that when those little pops happen, that is now the carbon fiber hull that is irreparably damaged.
It doesn't just heal itself for the next time that they dive.
Correct. Yeah, you're not going to go back to the surface, depressurize, and then repressurize and go back to the depth again and not have the same issue, even worse, the next time. So that's the bigger problem.
And there are some people at the company who are starting to think we're overlooking some issues, possibly. There's some character type flaws at play here, as Barry Plath would say.
It's the Elizabeth Holmes issue that we're facing of the billionaire innovator who is smarter, wiser. Their ways are higher than our ways, and they cannot, will not, should not be questioned by any means. And then people are challenging them with physics and reality and things that are implausible or impossible, or terrible things that are inevitable and certain to take place. Yet they're ignoring all of that. Don't want to hear it.
This probably would have happened sooner without David, who we meet in the beginning of the documentary. He is, at this point in time, the OceanGate pilot. What's his official title? They all have ridiculous titles. Director of Marine Operations.
Yep.
And he takes the submersible down with Stockton on it. And Stockton says, hey, I'm going to pilot this one.
Oh, this was when this was for the test dive. So after Boeing wasn't involved anymore, Stockton took the plans, built out his own engineering team to build the Boeing plans that were basically categorized as, here's where you're trying to go, and this is definitely the danger zone for what would happen here.
Which they depicted very easily in the plan with a skull and crossbone emoji.
He just thought it was pirate themed. He thought it was just nautically placed there for emphasis. So Stockton was forging ahead with his own team. And then they were going to test now, because technically they did build a submersible that's mostly made out of carbon fiber. And then it had a titanium dome at the front of it, which again, mixing materials, if you're attaching a carbon fiber hull and then placing a titanium, like those two materials don't go together. So that fusing point that happens, it's a failure point because you're basically just gluing it on.
Was this a test, though? Because they brought people down with them on this. Remember?
Everything. Every test that they did, they brought people down with them, too. So, yes, there were a few mission specialists who paid for this experience as well.
We have Stockton piloting them this time down to the Titanic. And by some miracle, they do make it there.
Oh, was that the Titanic or was that the Andrea Doria? There was the other
I
shipwreck.
thought this was the Titanic.
No,
okay,
no.
so this was the other one. So I didn't even realize there was another boat involved.
Well, because that one's not as deep.
Ship. I'm sorry.
Yes, a ship. So this
is when they get stuck under the bow.
Yes.
Because Stockton doesn't know how to pilot a submersible, but insisted.
Well, and also, it's PlayStation controller. I know there's times where I'm playing Rocket League and I do backflips when I meant to do a front flip. So, I mean, there's stuff that happens with a PlayStation controller. We can't blame him. I can't fully fault the man for that.
Maybe that's why they switched the controller out.
Yeah, they went to the Logitech. I feel like you'd go another direction, though, probably. Go with like a custom one.
I mean, it couldn't be Stockton's issue that he's just not trained in this and doesn't know what he's doing. It must be someone else's fault or something else's fault.
I think I get the feeling that Stockton was kind of a push it to the limit. Oh, nobody ever lets you get this close to the shipwreck. Yeah, you shouldn't be 3 meters off of the shipwreck in the debris field because then your vessel is at risk.
So David pretty much realizes at this point that Stockton's a fucking idiot. And he's going to need to be the voice of reason to point out that there's lots of issues.
Well, he starts to look into this now of, okay, we are building our own vessel here. Let me take a look at these components here. And every single custom piece that comes through the shop now in engineering, David's pointing out there's an issue with this. There's an issue with all of these things. So everything that you're putting together has an issue. So all you're building is one big problem.
Stockton doesn't like hearing that. So the retaliation begins.
Well, and David was pushing for, if we are putting all these shitty components together, could we do like a third-party kind of inspection that would take place where maybe somebody else would look at it and give a thumbs up to say, yeah, this vessel is approved for human life?
That was everyone's expectation when they first joined the company. He was saying to everyone, that was something that was definitely going to be done because they're going to be taking passengers down. Of course, we're going to have this classed. We're going to have this third party inspected. We're going to do all the safety things.
Because we need to make money on this thing. Yeah.
You know, until he realized that what he built was a tinderbox. And then they decided we're not going to do any third party inspection or anything. We're just going to keep saying everything's all good. Trust us.
Trust me, bro.
And the acoustic monitoring system that's very high tech.
Very high tech. And so David's saying, okay, I would rather not have the audio recording of the ship failing being the system that lets us know that the ship is about to fail. So I'm going to go ahead and do a safety report, a write-up.
They ask him to conduct the safety investigation.
I think that Stockton was sick of David hearing, or like David coming to him with all of these concerns. And so he's like, why don't you write me a book about all of these safety concerns that you have? And so that's all David needed. He was like, okay, great. I'm going to go through all of this and do all these different tests. Anything that would be done as like a third party verification, I'm going to go ahead and do that just to see where we're at with this. Not great.
No, he takes his time. He looks at everything. And at the end, he produces a report that looked like the home inspection that we got on that one terrible house that was 93 pages long.
It was 146 pages long. But yeah, because we were first-time home buyers, and I was talking to my boss that day. I was like, how long was your home inspection report? Just out of curiosity. He's like, I don't know, 10 pages. And I was like, all right, yeah, ours was like a bit more than that, like 14 times that. He was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that.
That's what he sends over to Stockton.
Yeah.
And he's not real happy, even though he's the one who asked David to write a formal report that now all of these safety concerns are documented in a report.
Well, here's the problem. It's documented and he emailed it because David's not a dum-dum. So yeah, he emailed it from his OceanGate official email address, CC'd everybody on it who needed to be on it. And now the next day, David's getting pulled into a very important meeting with Stockton, all the other head people, and HR. So,
That's how you know there's a problem.
Not looking good, man.
He must have gone into this knowing this is probably my last day at OceanGate when the HR person was also on the meeting. Not a good sign.
Not good.
I guess he recorded this because we get the audio from it. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in this documentary because there is so much video footage of Stockton showing off all of the submersibles because he wanted to create a lot of marketing material. So there's stuff in this documentary that's completely unique from the stuff that's in the Max documentary. And we're getting secret audio recordings.
Well, yeah, because this was like the staff side of things. So David knew something was up. And when he saw HR was on there, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and secretly record this meeting. Better to have it and not need it just in case. So this was the day pretty much that everybody in the company, everybody who stayed, because obviously David was fired. He was let go that day. Everybody else who was at OceanGate kind of realized, oh, Stockton's insane. He's a crazy person. He's a psychopath.
Well, it was sad that David had to frame it for Stockton, like all of the safety concerns, as I'm worried for you. I don't think you should get inside this thing and test it. We should put it on a wire and send it down to depth. We shouldn't be putting any human beings inside of it. Never mind, we shouldn't put passengers in it. We shouldn't put other employees and crew members in it.
Yeah, because Stockton kept trying to recruit different people to be the captains, usually young women to be the face of the company.
Yeah, why don't you be the pilot? That'll play great on television. The media is going to love that we have a female pilot.
It doesn't come with a pay raise, though. It's a very lateral move of you being the face of the company.
It's just so much bullshit.
Which these are all things that I have heard personally in corporate America, too, of like, oh, you could be the head of this department, face of this department. It's a lateral move, though. So there's these different toxic leadership traits that are on full display here.
Oh, Stockton's a horrible person because when they fire David, he tells someone that, oh, it would be nothing to me to take $50,000 and go ruin his life.
Because this was the point where I think it was the head of engineering was asking. Yeah, because I think that was who Stockton told he would gladly spend $50,000 to destroy someone's life, meaning David's life, because David is bad-mouthing the company now with OSHA reporting and things that are going on with the safety concerns and the whistleblowing that's now taking place. But the head of engineering was then realizing Stockton is a narcissist, he's psychopath, he's crazy, and he's just all in for full steam ahead no matter what, and will bulldoze any opposition, not listen to any advice from any professionals. So how do you manage that as an employee of this person? Typically, that's where government regulations and regulatory bodies, third-party people would come in and say, what the fuck are you doing? This is not safe.
No, but he has figured out a way to skirt every regulation that he possibly can. So instead, everyone just starts quitting. We've even got poor Bonnie. She's a CPA. She took a pay cut to come here and be an accountant because her part-time hobby is scuba diving. And they want to make her the pilot.
And she's like, uh-oh. They're about to start doing some deep ocean testing, and they want me to be the pilot on this thing? I read David's report. I got to get out of here.
I do think it came down to Stockton's hubris in that he wanted to pilot the submersible, but also at some point, I don't think there was anyone left to do it because he ends up being the one to go down and test the Titan.
But also, he was the one who, on the Andrea Doria test, he forced David to allow him to do it. So I think he did want to do it. He wanted to be the one picking up the sticks.
But I don't think he was doing it in a self-sacrificing way.
Absolutely
like
not.
If something bad happens,
no,
it'll be me inside, not one of my innocent employees who maybe doesn't fully understand the danger that I'm putting them in.
No, and now we're getting into COVID times too, where people are less likely to quit their jobs. The job market is tightening up a little bit more. So they have their jobs. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to push back. They don't want to get fired. So we go to the deep sea test where they're seasoning the hull, as it's being referred to, in a carbon fiber hull.
Like a cast iron skillet?
There's not enough grapeseed oil that you can rub on this thing to keep it together.
The footage of him during the testing was batshit crazy, was it not?
They were so loud. The pops that were happening in the hull were tremendously audible. You did not need the monitoring system to report back to you on this. If you're sitting inside of it and you're hearing the ship crumble like this, that's got to be terrifying.
I do think that at some point he realized that he was probably in danger because he doesn't go down the full 4,000 meters. He goes
3,000
939 meters.
Because it was the 39th dive, so he wanted to do that symbolically.
No. We saw the look on your face. He was scared shitless and wasn't sure which one of those pops could be the end for him, and so he went back up.
Every single one could have been a catastrophic failure.
And then they open the front of the submersible, and he pops out and acts like that was a great success. Let's toast with some champagne. Don't even bother writing down that we only went to the depth that we did. Just put the 4, because I'm pretty sure if we went down 4,000, everything would have been good.
Close enough. If you don't count 3939 as 4,000, then you're full of shit. That's just a rounding error at that point.
And we're good. That was successful. So let's start getting some people on here.
Great. Yeah, let's go to the Bahamas and continue testing. We need a nice clean dive, because that was what the engineering team was upset about here.
Right, because Stockton was ready to start making money.
He was ready to open it up and just start taking people on board, and the engineering team was like, let's push back.
Hey, you remember the acoustic monitoring system? It looks pretty bad.
Hey, and guess what? We got the ship to the Bahamas here now. There's a big old crack all the way along the side of the hull.
So that's probably not good.
It's not just the truck coating that we sprayed on it in the parking lot. This is like in the hull.
To the point that they have to like scrape it out. What's the right term?
Yeah, like grind it down.
It down.
I think they were trying to see, they had to take this hull out of commission because obviously you can't send this one back down there. So this was the swap that happened because they never announced that the hull was swapped.
Well, that'd be bad for business.
Well, that would be bad for business. You'd have to go back to the drawing board and reconfigure everything that you've been doing, or you can just swap out the carbon fiber hull. You can't do that every single time, though, because I think that was what they were seeing was, wow, look how cheap and effective this is to do a carbon fiber hull. But every time you send it down to depth, it's going to rip to shreds, and you're going to need to swap that thing out. So you're going to have to build a new hull every single time you go down there if you're doing carbon fiber. Plus, that still doesn't eliminate the risk because all of those rips, those tears and pops and pings that you heard, any one of those could have been a catastrophic failure that ripped the entire hull end to end, and that would have been it.
That doesn't go over with the board of directors very well.
That's usually why stuff that's built to go down to those depths, it's all made out of one singular material, usually titanium. It's more expensive up front, but you don't have to keep rebuilding it. Once you build it the one time, it's pretty much built.
We can't start making money yet because now we got to replace the hull. So,
and we have to fire some engineers because obviously the cracks in the hull.
The board wants blood now.
That's an engineering problem. That's not a craft submersible piloting CEO decision problem, a design failure. That's what it was. The engineers should have found that sooner.
Poor Tony, the engineer, is like, I told you that this was what was going to happen. So it wasn't really my fault.
Tony
it was
had reports.
Your direction that we should keep going. But okay, I guess I'll be the one to fall on the sword and get fired because I'm the small guy.
Well, yeah, it was, in Stockton's words when he took him to lunch was, it's either you or me, and it can't be me. So, sorry, Tony. Sorry, not sorry. I don't think he really cared at that point.
They're starting to build this new hull, and they are conducting more testing, much like they did with Boeing, because they're building a small-scale one before they go ahead and invest in building the full-size hull.
Yes, this is when we get Phil, the new director for engineering.
So I'm glad that they are continuing to do the tests. But once again, the tests show that it fails. It gets a full 1,000 meters short of how deep it needs to go. It's only 3,000 meters, and it keeps blowing apart.
And that's enough for Stockton to say, well, close enough. Because, hey, what did we say? 3939? That's just a rounding error. So about 3,100? That's basically like 4,000.
Let's keep going.
Build it full size this time. That ought to do it. It's because the scaled model is too small. It's not able to withstand the pressure. That's the problem, must be, in terms of reasoning there. So this is when Emily, she is the other employee who we hear from repeatedly.
She was an intern who then was granted a full-time position with really no change in pay and was another female pilot to be. And she's like, I'm getting out of here.
Well, yeah, because at this point,
dangerous.
She was worried when they found the first cracked hull, and then they were going to replace the hull because she had safety concerns. It was an issue. And then when they got Phil in there, they were going to do all these new tests, build a new hull. Great. They're going to do the right thing. They're going to follow all these safety protocols, all the concerns that were raised. And then you're finding out, no, they're just doing this to forge ahead. They're going to go do the exact same thing that they did before. And so now Emily's ready to just get out of here while she still has the chance.
The sad thing is the number of people who left this company and knew that Stockton was probably going to kill someone one day with what he was doing.
Definitely himself and like anybody else who happens to be in the vessel that day too.
And yet there was only one person who was willing to become a whistleblower.
And that was David. And he had his whole OSHA lawsuit investigation that was going on. He's protected under the Whistleblower Act for retaliation stuff, but I think there was still counter lawsuits.
What retaliation is left? He doesn't work at the company anymore. Isn't that usually what the whistleblower retaliation stuff is for?
Well, and that's what they were saying was like, oh, yeah, you're protected under this stuff, but we're not like witness protection. Like they can still come after you in other ways. And that's exactly what happened was there were other lawsuits. It was things that just slowed things down in the legal process. But I think David's main thing was he needed to keep this investigation active as long as possible because then that would delay them from getting paid customers too, if it's still under investigation. So he was holding out as long as he could.
And they basically drain him of money. This is the Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively playbook of lawsuits. And so he has to say, I can't do it anymore. And he has to walk away from the OSHA
claim. Yeah, because it was like under review. They had already done their investigation and now it was just under review. And it just sits there. Because
the guy from OSHA pissed me off when he was like, I have a lot of cases. Like, I have like 9 cases in front of him. So
11 other cases in front of yours.
I can't just like let you cut the line. I have other things I've got to deal with. So you're going to have to wait.
Well, I don't like that. It's just this limbo state where it's, okay, the investigation has been done. It is complete. We'll let you know if anything else comes up. But I've got all this other stuff that I need to file in the meantime. So there's no like turnaround time. There's no dates in mind. There's nothing scheduled.
No, and meantime, we've got a company that's going completely unregulated. That's goal is to bring paying customers inside this vessel that you're being told is dangerous for multiple reasons.
Was there a way to flag this with another department that you could escalate or something?
I just want to know what the other cases he had were, because you can report a lot of different concerns to OSHA. Was it as dire as 5 people are going to implode at the bottom of the sea in front of the Titanic?
Maybe not that specific. Probably not.
I'm just wondering, maybe we need like a rating system instead of first come, first serve. Perhaps we need to have like an assessment of potential danger or damage, and we rate the priority that way.
Well, I guess we'd have to know what the other cases are if we're going to make an educated decision on that. So there's no way to fully know. But I mean, there were plenty of other opportunities here for the catastrophic failure to take place, because then this is also the time when Stockton is popping off on media coverage. He's reaching out to other places because he's feeling like, oh, we're getting closer to paying customers. So we got to get the word out. We got to get some buzz going here.
You got to become a household name.
So CBS Sunday Reports is invited to jump on the submersible, and their journalistic check was, well, I don't think they'd invite us on something if it was going to be dangerous.
Wrong.
Because they want good press, right? No, there's no such thing as bad press, guys. So who knows? Who knows what's going on here? We learn about the OceanGate rule of 3, the ridiculous safety requirements for their dives.
It's more of a superstition. If 3 things go wrong prior to the dive, they cancel it.
They're not doing it anymore. It's like an illusion of safety because there were not a lot of successful dives, and they're trying to say it's because They are so over the top when it comes to safety that if any little thing is slightly off, then the dive is canceled.
If we see a dolphin in the distance through the porthole, done.
If somebody brings a banana into the vessel and is locked in with it, cancel the dive.
That and the high-tech acoustic monitoring system, there's no way anything bad could ever happen to this submersible.
So they're already getting calls. They're already getting people lining up to jump headfirst into this submersible.
Look through a very small window. I will say that's probably the biggest, maybe not the biggest disappointment. If it had been successful, that would be the biggest disappointment. There's so many of them crammed into this tiny little craft. And then there's this very small hole to look out of, and it's so dark.
Okay, what I was going to say was that the titanium lid of this thing, the dome, that window is actually very large for the pressures and the depths that they're going to. Windows are not a great thing to have. Obviously, for tourist reasons, you need big old windows because you want the paying customers to see it and experience it and get the whole vibe. All that is that's more stress points on the vessel.
Like, I would have said, let me know when this thing's panoramic.
Yeah, that's not going to happen at 4,000 meters. You're not going to have... That's why spaceships don't do that either. They have portholes that are like this big, like 3 inches diameter.
Who says it can't be done?
The laws of physics are usually the one that would say that is not recommended.
Was it dive 80 when they heard a very loud bang? That's their very...
That was the loud pop.
Sophisticated term.
It was when they resurfaced. So they did do a dive. They were trying to go to depth, deep sea dive, but it was called off and they were returning to the surface. And there was a very loud pop at the surface.
But we're up here, so who cares?
Oh, well, that should be fine.
Doesn't matter. It wasn't while we were under the water.
The hull is going to heal between now and the next dive.
It's going to regenerate.
That's what it does. So,
turns out that after that, every time they went down, there was an uptick in cracking identified by the acoustic monitoring system.
So the shitty acoustic monitoring system that we've been ripping on because they touted it as this
infallible tool
and just wonderful, technologically advanced, very sophisticated monitoring system that let them know that there are issues. They weren't even looking at those reports anymore?
Right. To be fair, the system worked the way it was supposed to. It relied on human beings to interpret the data and then decide if it was safe to continue or not. And that's the point of failure.
Yeah, because I can't tell Stockton that it's not safe to continue because then he'll fire me.
Or he won't listen anyway. So what's the difference?
Here's the other kicker, is that you also have the carbon fiber hull, the Titan Submersible, that was left at the dock in Canada over the winter between dive 80 and then the next season.
So season 2 is done. We're pulling this thing out of the water. Why would we have a storage area for it that is like temperature controlled, maybe a place where it's going to be safely locked and stored away so we know that nobody's able to mess with it over the winter? No, let's just keep it on the dock like they do all the other boats.
Nobody needs to mess with this thing.
Well, I'm just saying you have no idea what happened to it while it laid on a dock all winter.
Science is messing with this thing.
Because I don't think Stockton was out there every day checking on it. I think they threw a tarp over it. They put it up on some cinder blocks and they said, see you next season.
Some cinder blocks. You don't think they shrink wrapped it?
I don't even think they did that.
I don't think they did. I'm surprised they didn't leave it floating, just bashing into the dock all winter.
No buoys or anything.
Nothing. No bumpers. Absolutely nothing. Just knocking around, crashing into this thing. Because they're sure as shit not going to pay to ship this thing to the Bahamas for the winter.
No, they say the actual issue and the reason they chose to do that was it was cost prohibitive to find it a proper storage space.
That seems like a good enough reason. So Phil quits because he's like, I don't want to be here when this thing goes tits up.
They all know that carbon fiber cannot go below a certain temperature. It cannot freeze.
You are weakening the structural integrity of your entire vessel, which now you are placing under immense levels of pressure where you've had cracking structural damage previously on a non-brittle winter-exposed hull before. So what do you think this one's going to do?
Let's get this baby in the water and find out. Season
you know what?
3.
Next season, final dive. Well, almost the final dive, because they had a YouTuber come on board, Scuba Jake. And Scuba Jake, he was dodging bullets.
Man, this guy is so emotional over retelling this story because the only reason that he is still here is that they weren't able to actually dive the submersible.
They canceled the dive due to weather. Then they tried to dive closer to the coast and had to cancel for weather issues again.
He was so lucky because these trips are 9 days long. And they do, first of all, who has the time? I guess that's why you have to have this much money. Second, that was 9 days. They had 5 opportunities, they said, to try to get down to the Titanic. And the weather held out the entire time. It was terrible. There was no way they were going down there.
Count your lucky stars. Stockton looked bummed, too. Did Stockton have a death wish?
I don't know if they get paid. I guess they do. It's just they have... Okay, this is the problem. I'm pretty sure they do still get the money from the dive, but they have to promise him a makeup dive.
A future one.
So now that's money out of next season that they're going to have to spend taking somebody out a second time, when that could have been another $250,000 times however many people were going to go on that dive. There's a limited season in which they can do this.
Yeah, like you can see the wheels turning in Stockton's head as they're coming back because he was really trying to push for this dive to get down there, but it did not happen. So Jake lucked out. He got out of there. And then the next dive was the catastrophic failure that took place.
They don't spend a lot of time in this documentary walking us through exactly what happened or even talking about that dive in particular. Really, this was more of an exploration of what went wrong along the way. All the red flags and the whistleblowers that knew that there was an issue with this company and with Stockton's leadership.
Well, because Stockton was even recorded in David's secret recording when he was being fired that day, was where he was adamant about nobody's dying on my watch. That's not going to happen. So I think he was just delusional, because otherwise, yeah, this is just a very convoluted way to end your own life with all this other collateral damage that took place too. There's tons of other people involved who didn't need to be involved in that process.
Well, he wanted to be remembered. He wanted to have some sort of legacy, and this is what it's going to be.
I mean, did the other documentary, the one on Discovery Plus, I didn't get to watch all of that one. I only caught bits and pieces of it here and there. But the other one, did that go through the details of like what actually happened with the submersible on the day?
I believe it did, yeah.
See, I'd already watched...
It's been a lot of like the tin can explanation.
Oh gosh, yeah, because I was watching all those simulations and stuff like that on TikTok when it was happening at the time too, because everybody was trying to explain the different experience of what took place there.
It sounds like it was pretty horrible. They think that they knew that something was likely going to go wrong, probably because this thing was making a shit ton of cracking noises and pops.
At the depth that they were.
Don't you think that Stockton should have known that they should have come back up then?
Well, I think that they were trying to.
All the systems, they lost communication.
They lost communications. There was systems where I think it was they were trying to release the weights, and there was
the counterbalance
to come back up. But if it was a failure, or if it was stuck, or if it didn't open.
Well, and like they said, the issue with this is you do not know when the point of failure is going to occur.
Right. You can know that there are issues and that you're having trouble and there are problems, but then if you have no way to resurface, and they continually had electric issues too, which I'm sure storing it over the winter at sub-zero temperatures did not help with any electrical issues that they had. There could have been plenty of corrosion and different things that took place like that over the winter as well, because it wasn't stored properly. So they were already having those electrical failures. And then now you go into a new season, you're losing communication with the surface. You're not able to control the vessel. You're not able to release the ballasts to return to the surface. It's just a bunch of different safety concerns, a lot of things that are out of your control. And then at that depth, when something does happen, the hull gives out. All it needs is that one rip to go all the way through, and then
it's an
instantaneously crushing the entire structure.
It's unbelievable. And unbelievable isn't even like the right word. It's criminal that they were allowed to be this negligent, and there have been no lawsuits associated with this.
Well, I think what's difficult too is that it's not only negligence, but it's also intentionally circumventing existing policies and structures. And I mean, Stockton had joked about buying a congressman and made comments like that to other people that they reported on after the fact.
Right. People have a lot of opinions about regulation, but there are people like Stockton Rush, which is the reason why some of these things do need to exist.
Yeah, because this comes back to capitalism without conscience. And that's kind of where we're treading into right now, is where if you're disregarding everything else and you're going after, we need to make money on this, the business is counting on this, we're accountable to the shareholders for this, and you're putting everyone else at risk as part of that too. They were trying to say that they made it abundantly clear through all of their documentation, this is an experimental submersible.
Right. They had a good lawyer who wrote up a contract that made it clear that you're signing your life away and this is dangerous. But still, that doesn't negate the fact that they were negligent in a lot of different ways. Did they even do a test dive before they went down for the first dive of the season to see if this craft was in the proper shape to bring paying customers down? I don't
think they did, because it was the next dive after dive 80.
Instead, Stockton's counting how many possible dives they had for season 3 and trying to figure out how much money they could pack into every single one of them.
So that's where I get confused, because it seems like he kind of had a death wish, but then also was just trying to maximize the number of dives that he could do instead. But then how are you going to do that when your hull implodes? You aren't going to be able to run anymore.
I truly think it was an issue of ego, that he was convinced that he was right, everyone else was wrong. He pushed the limits multiple times and nothing bad happened.
The look on his face when they were seasoning the hull on that one test, the dive 39, when he was afraid to go to 4,000 meters, rightfully so, because he had tested his luck and pushed it to the limit to get to 39.39. It seemed like it made sense to him then that this is not good.
He got spooked.
He looked terrified on that dive. The footage that they had of him in the submersible, when you're hearing all those pops and cracks, he looked terrified.
Well, I think the other problem was he didn't have like pretty much any experience doing anything in the ocean. Like, this was not somebody who spent their entire life doing anything that revolved around this area of expertise. He just decided this was a lucrative field for him to get into, and then lost all of the experts and people who actually were there along the way to guide him. And it was just left up to him and his own intuition, which was clearly very poor. Actually, it pointed to money, not safety. And we ended up at the bottom of the ocean.
So let us know your thoughts.
Would you have boarded the Titan? Not knowing what we know now.
I think,
just having
the promotional materials.
Yes, the Titanic, the idea of going down to the Titanic, titillating you.
Oh, there you go. I think the issue that I have now is that you got to be more careful, because it is kind of like, I mean, I've gone on traveling carnival rides before where you don't really know.
That's risky.
How is it put together? Who did this? How many times has it been assembled this year, or checked, or maintained? I've taken that gamble a couple times, but also I've had the foresight to look at the structural integrity of the machine, let it run a couple of times. You kind of do a quick check of it.
Your risk analysis.
Yeah. And then you can say, no, not for me. And there have been a few times where I've passed on a few rides when it comes to that too. So it happens. I fear I wouldn't know enough about this, where then looking at it from the outside, I wouldn't know what's wrong with it. I would know that hearing all the cracks and pops in the carbon fiber hull, not good at depth.
We have really good bullshit detectors, though, and I don't think that we would have been into Stockton.
I think we would have asked questions and he would have gotten sick of us.
Yeah, he would have gotten mad at us and told us we could have our check back.
Yeah, here's your deposit. Stop emailing me. Hey, Stockton, just following up. Couple more questions because I did some more research. How did you attach a titanium cap to a carbon fiber hull?
How much glue is on this thing?
Where did you store it over the winter?
Did you actually watch the Titanic? Did you watch the movie? Like the entire thing? Because I usually am tempted to stop at VHS 1 at the end of it. I'm wondering if that's what Stockton did, because he didn't have enough fear of the ocean like he should.
Everybody needs a healthy dose of fear from the ocean. The ocean wins. Ocean is undefeated.
I'm telling you, you get caught in a riptide one time.
Respect.
A few quick announcements before we go. Our next documentary that we will be diving into next week.
It's another nautical themed one. Kind of.
Trainwreck, Poop Cruise.
Poop Cruise. See, I've watched a couple of the Trainwreck documentaries before, and it seemed like most of them were about like music festivals, because I think they have one about Woodstock 99, which was really good. And then they did another one of a music festival in Houston. I think it was called Astroworld. Yeah. And I didn't see that one yet, but it seemed like they were very music fest oriented, and now they're throwing us a curveball with Poop Cruise. So we're here for it.
That's coming out on Netflix on June 24th. Our episode will be dropping that Thursday, so we'll see you then.